I'm Joe Linehan, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 7th, 1972, and I'm as grateful as I know how to be for that period of time. Someone said 52. I'll take that, but I won't have 52 till October. So it's good to be here. And, it's not a record, it's just a personal best. You know what I mean? What?
Can you turn your mic a little bit more towards you?
How's that? Is that better? Okay. What is this, court slips or what? Well, it's great to be here. I know some of you, and I've met several people this evening. You know, it's always good to expand, you know, and get to know more people, more places. I got to meet Danny for about the third time, and I sponsor Danny's brother and Edmund, and I apologize to AA for that, you know. But I'll start out with a story. They said they wanted a spiritual talk, so I'll tell you a story about a friend of mine named Ted, who's a judge in the southern part of Texas. Ted's not only a judge, he's an alcoholic. And periodically he'd tell his wife, he said, honey, I've got to go down to the courthouse and work. He'd get out of the house so he could drink. And so he told her one night, said, hey, I've got some stuff at the courthouse I've got to take care of. And she said, okay, fine. And he goes down there. Of course, he goes out and gets drunk. Well, he got a little bit too much and he got sick. And he threw up and he got puke all over his shirt. He gets home about 1 o'clock in the morning. He can't figure out what to do with that shirt. He thought, well, if I put it in the bottom of the clothes hamper, it'll take her at least 2 days to find it. I'll have a story made up by then. So he sticks it in the bottom. He's drinking coffee and reading the newspaper the next morning. His wife comes in and says, well, Ted, you told me you were going to the courthouse. He said, oh, I did. And she said, well, what's this? Held that shirt up. He said, oh, Eddie, you wouldn't believe it. He said, I was down there working and the sheriff brought in a bad drunk. I had to help him get him in jail. He got sick and puked on all of us. He said, but he's coming in front of me this morning and I'm going to give him 30 days. He said, well, you ought to give him 90. I said, why? He said, well, he's shitting your pants too. And if you tell anybody in our home group that I cussed, you're a liar. Oh, it's great. That's great. Hey, do you all know what happens to a politician when he takes Viagra? He gets taller. I'm supposed to tell you in a general way what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. I try to do that. You know, as far as I knew, it was a pretty normal thing going along. Everything seemed to be going good for me till about the first grade. And I started school and, you know, right almost immediately I started seeing the differences in me and these other kids. And that didn't go away for a long, long time. I had a lot of trouble in school. I just could not read, and they just kind of pushed me along to the second grade and no results. And they got me to the third grade, and they decided that I need to do the third grade over. So that's okay, you know, we can do that. And so I did the third grade the second time, same results, still can't read. So I guess they could just give up. And they said, well, you just keep moving him along, you know, and maybe he'll pick it up somewhere. And, you know, it became a discipline problem. And I started acting out. And when I was in that third grade the first time, several things happened. He said in December of that year, my daddy was 40 years old. And he got injured in an accident overseas, and they sent him back to the States, and over months and months and months of treatment, he finally died. And my dad was never really a player. My security was my mother, my two older sisters, and my two grandmothers. And so it was a transition for sure, you know, but what came about after that, my dad dies in December. In June, my mother marries another man, and he's totally opposite. This guy was a real square. He went to work every day and came home at 5 o'clock every day, and you know, he started asking me to do things like pick up your dirty clothes, you know. Put your towel up where it belongs to. And I just wasn't used to that. I was just used to those women taking care of me. And so right off, we started butting heads. And that was to go on until I was a couple of years sober. Kept going along. Nothing of any consequence. The first thing that I really did of any consequence was, I think I was in the 5th grade, 4th grade, something like that. And we had a spelling test. And my favorite teacher all time was Mrs. Matthews. And she'd be a large lady, and she'd sit at the front of the room, and you'd bring her speller up, and she'd check off well, obviously, if you can't read, you can't spell, so I knew what I was going to get. So I got along behind her, and I had my speller, and I was going like that, like I was going to hit her. And she says, the kids are all laughing, and he says, what's he doing? And the snitch in the class said, well, he's acting like he's hitting you with a speller. And she said, well, Joe, you want to hit me with that speller, go ahead. I said, oh, no, Miss Matthews, I wouldn't do that at all. She said, no, really. She said, if you want to hit me with that speller, you go ahead. She shouldn't have said it the second time. I mean, I reared back, and her old gray hair flew out here, and her glasses fell down, and she starts bawling, and I start bawling. Half the class is bawling, and principal comes in, she starts bawling, and they sent me home for 2 or 3 days, and that was about it. And I did some stupid stuff, and a time or two I'd ask my mother if I could go to the movie after school, and she'd say no, and I'd go anyway. And, I was just kind of pushing against it all the time. I got into junior high school, and I don't know if anybody noticed or not, but my ears don't really fit my head. And I remember my uncle telling my mother she was concerned about my ears, and he tells my mother, he says, don't worry about that, he'll grow into them. Well, he lied, you know what I mean? And, I'm in junior high school. You know how you are in junior high school. It's kind of the girl thing, and really so self-conscious. And I'd look at my sister's ears, and then I'd look in the mirror at my ears, and in that short time, mine had grown. The more you think about something, the bigger it gets. And anyway, I was really sensitive about those ears, and I was sitting in class, and I don't know what I did, but this teacher grabbed me by the ear and just gave me a jerk. And I can't say I blacked out, but I know I got up, I hit her, and before she could hit the ground, I kicked her. And right in the middle of that, I'm thinking, this ain't good. You know what I mean? And so, it's just stuff like that. Anyway, 15 years old, some older guys said, hey, you want to go out Friday night and do some drinking? I said, sure. I'd never done that, but, I didn't want to tell them that. And, I was kind of, no matter what group I was around, I didn't seem to quite get in the circle. I could get close to the circle, but I couldn't get in the circle. And I was raised on a farm, so I hung out with the farm kids a little bit. I was a little bit of an athlete, so I kind of hung out with them a little bit. But, there was always that. I was always a step and a half out of that circle. And I wanted so bad to be accepted and be part of something. So anyway, they asked me to go drink. I went to drink. And we went on our old country road, and they opened a can of beer, and they handed it to me. And I took a drink, and I thought, that's the nastiest stuff I've ever drank in my life, you know. And they said, well, what do you think? And I said, oh, it's great. It's great. I love this, you know. And something happened to me that didn't happen to those other boys. And they could see it. So they take me into town to the Sonic Drive-In. And I've always loved women. Always have loved women, but I was scared to death of them. But that night, and whatever I drank, it erased all that, and that 15 years of lust came out, you know. And I went down through that Sonic Drive-In, and I went right to those girls, and I didn't beat around the bush. I told them exactly what I had in mind, and just car to car to car. And I didn't have any luck, so coming back, I thought, well, I'll just whip all these guys in here. And I weighed about 100 pounds, you know, and most of them just laughed at me, you know, and I'd call them out. But I don't know about you, but that first experience with alcohol seemed like it lasted forever. That euphoria was, you know, the idea I had of myself at 15 years old, as I was little, I was ugly, I was dumb, I was poor, I hated every aspect of my life. And I was absolutely paralyzed with fear. And whatever was in that can and whatever tasted that bad fixed all that. And so for the next 12 years, every time I drank alcohol, I tried to recapture that first experience. And early on, you know, the period seemed to get a little shorter. And as time went on, I noticed that euphoric feeling was shorter and shorter. And there at the last, it didn't come at all. And I guess when people say it quit working, I guess that's what they're talking about. I mean, I'd get drunk, you know, and I was bad to throw up for a time, but then I got over that, and I thought I'd arrived. But about that time, I started wetting my pants, you know, so it wasn't a very good trade-off, you know. I used to tell them I suffered from the rusty zipper disease. Anyway, I got kicked out of school my senior year, and my folks begged me, and I finally just said, I'll go back. So I went back the second senior year. If you'll do all the math, that means I've been in school for 14 years. And anyway, I didn't last but about 6 weeks the second senior year, and I got kicked out, and that was fine with me. I just wanted to get a job and get on my own and all that. I left my little girlfriend in school, and I went out to make my millions. And we were going to get married her senior year at Christmas, and she got pregnant, so we kind of had to, you know, change that up a little bit, and we got married, and we had a little girl, and this little girl was premature. She weighed just about 2 pounds, and she was almost 3 months premature. Nowadays, that's still a problem, but it's not near the problem it was back then. And anyway, after 18 hours, we lost that baby. And sadly, I used that little girl's life and her death as an excuse for more drinking. We had an alcoholic marriage, as I see it. We'd bust up and then go back together, and we'd bust up, and she'd get an attorney. I'd talk her out of it, and we'd get back together, and then we'd bust up, and she went and moved in with her mother and dad. And after a couple of weeks, I gave up, and I moved in with them too. You know, but this time, drinking is ongoing. I mean, every day. And so, after 4 years, we were able to get a divorce. And that came at a great time because my girlfriend was pregnant. So I get out of this marriage, and I get into this other gal, and we have a little boy. And I thought, well, maybe this will turn me around. Little boy, I can get home. I had pictures of a little house with a little picket fence and get home, play ball with the kid, and none of that ever happened. When I realized I had the responsibility, not only of that woman, but that baby, it overwhelmed me. And I want out. And before we could get a divorce, she got pregnant the second time. And I got to get away from her, So we get a divorce. And that came at a great time because my girlfriend was pregnant. I can shorten this up considerably. I had 5 children with 4 women in 34 months. Jerry Springer died before he got to hear that story, Hey, at my 25th AA birthday, 4 of my 5 wives were there, sitting together, Anyway, along this line, I started out as, public drunk, and then I got a little assault and battery, and then I hit somebody with a beer bottle, and I got a maiming charge, and it got dropped, and so I'm climbing the ladder, you know what I mean? And I started out in the car business and did quite well. Kind of like Bill Wilson, at 21 years old, I made Pontiac Motor Division's Legion of Leaders. And I was one of the youngest men to ever do that. And I didn't know, nor did anybody else, that I had peaked out at 21 years old. And my life just made a right-hand turn. Everything was speeding up and progressing, and I believe it was May 1968, I darkened the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time. And, the book says we're not a glum lot. Trust me, what I walked into was a glum lot. There's 4 of the oldest human beings I'd ever seen in my life. Yeah. God almighty. And back then, they didn't talk about one day at a time. They talk about not drinking forever. I'm 23 years old. I'm thinking that's a long time. I looked at them and I said, hell, it could be 30 minutes. They're old, Anyway, there's AC, SD, WD, and Mac. And, those guys, what they did for me the next 3 years of me being in and out of the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous is they just slowly but surely, sharing their experience, spoon-fed me Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what your experience has been, but most everybody I talk to, I said, how long have you been sober? They're the same thing every time. This time? Hell no, last time. I mean, come on. But, Alcoholics Anonymous started working on me maybe at the very start, because my drinking was never the same. The remorse, the guilt, the shame, all that stuff was compounded, but just visiting, basically, Alcoholics Anonymous. So, things started picking up for me. I got a job with a little construction company, and this guy said, I'll pick you up in the morning at 6. And I said, okay. And I wasn't accustomed to getting up at 6, but anyway, I thought, man, I need to go downtown. I need to get something to eat. I'll go by the beer joint, maybe play a game of pool. Maybe I'll drink a beer. And I got overserved. And I got in a fight. And somehow or another, the guy I got in a fight with ended up in the trunk of my car. Now, I'm a blackout drinker, so I can't remember I got him, you know what I mean? And I'm driving around, and I don't know if you experienced this, but a lot of times I'm blacked out, I'll kind of come to, and then by the time I could get a plan to what to do with this guy, I'd black out again. So it was a long night for both of us. Yeah. I periodically live with my sisters and between wives and pregnant women. And I went to my brother-in-law and sister's house, straight people, never had a speeding ticket, just great people. And I went to my brother-in-law's house about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I get my brother-in-law, my sister, and their 3 kids up. I said, you got to come on out here tonight and see what I got. So I got the whole family out there, and they walked up to the back of the car, and I stuck the key in that trunk, and I turned it, and that deck lid came open, and this guy looked out. My sister goes, ah! She never was the same after that, It kind of scared me, I slammed it back down, and my brother-in-law says, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I have no idea. I've never stole anybody before, I don't have any experience, So anyway, I presume I just opened the trunk and walked off because he was gone and the trunk was open the next morning, But the next morning, we laughed about that night. Even my brother-in-law kind of got a little chuckle out of it. And the next morning, the doorbell rings. And if you live like I live, you don't go to the door, I never seen so many cops that look like this crowd right here, stand there looking at the door, And in Oklahoma County, they call that kidnapping. And anyway, I by the grace of God, a good attorney, I guess you'd say, I got a 3-year probation now, that deal, but I'm a convicted felon now. So I've got that hanging over me, and I was, I don't know, probably a year and a half into that 3, and I heard this loud noise, and the next thing I know, I'm on the floor, and then I got my arms behind me, and they're handcuffing me. And they apparently took me to jail. I don't remember too much about that, but that was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 10 that morning before I was sober enough to know what I'd been charged for. And I finally got somebody, I said, when am I going to get out of here? What's going on? He said, well, you're not for a while. I said, well, what am I charged with? He said, well, you've been charged with rape. And, you're in a pickle when you can't even defend yourself. The first thing an attorney asks you is what happened. And I don't know. To this very moment, I don't know whether you're looking at a guilty man or not. I think about that almost every day. Almost every day. I spent the entire summer 1971 in Oklahoma County Jail. I've been to lots and lots of little jails, but this was the big jail. And they kept saying, Tuesday's visitation day, Tuesday's visitation. Everybody got all excited. I didn't know anything about visitation day. I kind of got excited. And Tuesday rolled around, I'm looking out that little window, and I see my mother come in. I thought I knew she'd come. I'm her baby, Well, right behind her is my wife. I thought, wow, I'm surprised she came, but I'm glad she came. Well, right behind her is another wife. Wow, Well, I start looking over here, and my girlfriend's standing back over here, and her husband's behind her. My mother's about this tall, and she stands on her tiptoes. She said, honey, I know there's been a terrible mistake, and I'll have you together as soon as possible. I said, for God's sakes, don't do it today, This is the safest place for me, Somewhere around October the 5th, October the 6th, I'm in far southern part of Oklahoma on a construction job. I hear that my new girlfriend, who had kicked me out and told me not to come back, I was sober for a bit and we met. And then I took a drink and it was all over. But I got word that her favorite uncle had passed away. So somehow I got from Ardmore, Oklahoma, back to Edmond, Oklahoma. And I walked into her house with her entire family was there, unannounced, to take her to that funeral. And I had a pair of cut-off blue jeans on and a T-shirt, and I hadn't shaved or bathed in 2 or 3 days. And I walked in there, and I walked up to her. And if you're an alcoholic, I think you'll know what I'm trying to describe here. When she looked up at me, once again, I saw that look. And that look has every emotion known to man. There's frustration, there's anger, there's pity, there's just a special. I've seen that from my mother. I'd seen that from my sisters. I'd seen it from wives. And that day, that look hit me in a spot that I'd never been touched. And she never said a word. She didn't have to. And I turned and walked out of her house. And as I crossed her front lawn, I had 2 thoughts. And the first thought was, today's the day for you to stop drinking. And behind that, at that point, I'd stood in front of judges twice on very, very serious charges. I thought I knew the depth of fear. But there's a tidal wave of fear came right behind that thought. And I can remember my knees just almost wanted to buckle. And that wasn't an original thought, but it seemed to be deep and different than I'd ever experienced. And the next thought I had was an original thought. And the thought was, there's no way that you can stop drinking. And it's another paradox. As long as I thought I could, I couldn't. The very moment that I realized that I can't stop, I haven't had a drink since. I went back to those 4 old men. They're still there. And I started going back to AA. And one of them was kind of a jerk, a big guy, and he talked real loud. And have you ever been to church on a Sunday morning with a bad hangover? And the old preacher's up here, and he's bringing it down, and it's just like he's telling your story. You just want to slide down in that pew, you know. Every time that guy'd share, that's the way I felt, you know, just gave me the willies, you know. And I avoided him. But I hadn't been going back very long, and I went up to him after a meeting, and I said, Doc, do you really think I'm an alcoholic? He was a veterinarian. He said, Joe, here at Alcoholics Anonymous, we allow every man the dignity to figure that out for themselves based on the information out of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, I'm going to make an exception with you. I'm calling you alcoholic till I figure out what is wrong with you. And the next thing I said, I promise you, it came from my Heavenly Father. I said, would you help me? Would you be my sponsor? And his response was, I'd love to talk to you about that. So I was unemployable at the time, so I'd go to the veterinarian clinic. I'd walk down to the veterinarian clinic, and we had a little meeting, you know, back in the back. And, you know, that he started me on the path. And I had been going down there 3 weeks or so, you know. And we came in one day, we went to the back, sat down, and he turned around and he said, Joe, you can't read, can you? And, you know, I had close family members that didn't know that about me. I was a master at getting around that. And when he hit me with that, you know, I started that same old stuff that I'd always done. And I looked down on the floor, this old tile floor, and I said, no, Doc, I can't read. He said, well, boy, you're going to have to learn to read. And he said that was confidence or something. And I thought, well, I'm not doing nothing else, So I started taking reading lessons down there. He said, you got to learn to read. You got to read this book for the rest of your life. And so he started. Back there, I used Field and Stream, Popular Mechanics, and the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I started kind of picking it up, and I kind of picked it up pretty quick. And I don't know, I'd been going down there for a good while. And he said, hey, Sunday night, he said, I want you to read how it works at the speaker meetings. I said, you want me to read it? He said, yeah. Okay. So Sunday night rolls around, and I read how it works. Now, the speaker only had to talk about 20 minutes. We got through it, But, we only had one meeting a week in our little town, so we traveled about 4 other nights. Oklahoma City and Guthrie and Kingfisher, all around central Oklahoma. And it was great. It was absolutely great. I got a meeting going to the meeting. I got a meeting at the meeting. I got a meeting coming home, So they hadn't had a newcomer in a long time. I mean, they jumped on me like, we got one, they're just, every time the doorbell would ring, I'd look out there and there's one of them said, we're going to a meeting. I thought, oh, good, how enthusiastic we are early on. But, I was telling somebody earlier, I was the 5th guy to get sober in that little town. And the next, there's only one other survivor of the next 5. And those 8 guys all died active, sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Isn't that amazing? I took a little Hispanic kid called me from the airport, and he said, Joe, I'm ready to get sober. So I went and got him, and he's still sober. He's got 49 years. This past year, I'll have 50 this year. And he lived with me for a long, long time. I'll tell you a story about Chris. He was kind of like me. He'd get drunk and come back, get drunk. But anyway, Chris was living with me, and my mother called me, and she says, tell me about this kid that she was working with the wife in Al-Anon. And he said, Jerry's ready to get sober. And I said, really? She said, yeah, why don't you go call on him? So I grabbed Chris. And I knew what street he lived on, but I didn't know the actual address. So I got this brand new Mexican guy that's still vibrating, And we're driving up and down the street, and he said, he lives right there. And I said, well, how would you know that? He said, well, look at that car. And there was a brand new Ford there that had been hit more times than Joe Lewis. I mean, there wasn't a straight place. We went and knocked on the door, and Jerry came to the door, and he never drank again. He just died 3 years ago in Amarillo, Texas, But I hope everybody understands that if you're an alcoholic and you're sitting here, right now, and you don't have the obsession to drink, you've experienced a miracle. And that miracle is a gift. For certainty, it's nothing we did. It's truly the grace of God. I believe the grace of God is open to all. But for some reason or another, us old drunks, we have to spin that wheel and spin it till it comes up on our number. A sponsor can't produce that. Love won't fix it. 4 or 5 wives won't fix it. Mother's love won't fix it. But, I believe that's what happened to me walking across that front lawn. The book says that God resides deep down inside every man, woman, and child, the basic concept. And he said only there it can be found. And what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous is we take these steps that leads us to our own experience with a power greater than ourselves. There was a guy who wrote something one time that's always stuck with me. He said, envy is poison. To emulate is suicide. He's talking about spiritually. So you hear people all the time, oh, fake it till you make it and all that. Take the damn steps and something will happen. You don't have to fake nothing. If you don't think you're an alcoholic, don't say you're an alcoholic. The card that I read says a desire to. You know, hell, it's not. It takes a lot more to get to the penitentiary than it does to get in AA. You know, you got to really do something to get in the penitentiary. All you got to do is say, I think I got a problem. You're in, you know. What an amazing thing, you know. We're facing a lot of challenges. A lot of challenges. If any of you are into service, you know there's some stuff going on in New York, and that's certainly a problem and a concern. But the real problem for Alcoholics Anonymous is in these home groups. Home groups, 3 legacy home groups that fires on all 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, because if you're a part of that and you go to the district or the area, you're already versed. I think the craziest thing I ever heard in AA is, as I was a GSR in 1974 or something, and they said, well, about the time you learn your job, it'll be time to rotate out. As dumb as I was, that makes sense. I mean, how did we ever get anything done? So I just believe that the sponsorship, home group, and hopefully it's a 3 legacy group that has both open and closed meetings. You know, when I got sober, open meetings, the only open meetings you ever had was like this, when anybody could come. The group pamphlet says anybody can be in an open AA meeting, but only alcoholics participate. Oh, you can't do that. You can't do. Well, you can do that, or you can destroy our fellowship. Bill Wilson warns us in the 5th tradition that the preservation of this principle is life or death. Kind of, I'm playing on words here. You know, the preservation of this principle has to remain for the AA to survive. So, you know, we always want to be helpful in any way we can with any problem. But we have but one purpose. And I think we need to drive that home and not exclude anybody. And, you know, I've got a guy that I sponsor, and they were having a lot of trouble with people with problems other than alcohol. So he grabbed a bunch of them up and took them over here, and he says, let's start this, and you'll have this, and we'll have that. You know, most folks don't want to do that. They don't want to be of service. So I think if you're an alcoholic and you're sitting here and you're sober tonight, you know, I think we're the luckiest people on the planet. You know, only a handful of people in this worldwide have the opportunity to live 2 entirely different lives. Think about that. You know, I've experienced life in 2 different dimensions. One's just as important as the other. You know, I got a drink to get here. I enjoyed some of it. And I still like those kids I got. I got a bunch of them. Let me run down some things that have happened to me. I got a divorce when I was 10 years sober, and I went off into a little depression. Thought, you know, I can't live with them drunk, can't live with them sober. I ended up dating a girl in Sherman, Texas that I'd known years before, and we had a long-distance deal, and I was about to wear a truck out driving back and forth to Sherman, Texas from Edmond. So I called her. I said, look, you're going to have to move to Edmond. And she said, if you can find me a job, I'll move. So I happened to sponsor this guy that worked for a big insurance company. And I said, hey, Ken, here's this girl's name and number. I want you to call her and give her a job, and I'll see you at the meeting tonight. Boom. About 3 hours later, Cheryl called, and she said, you'll never believe what happened. Said a total stranger called me and hired me over the phone. And I said, God works in mysterious ways. And she and I had both had trouble. Obviously, I'd had trouble with relationships, but we didn't move in and we didn't start playing house and all that. And anyway, we just were dating and what have you. And she had a whole bunch of kids. Obviously, I had a bunch. And she called me one day at work. She said, "Hey, after the meeting, I want to go out to eat, and I want you to come along. We need to talk." That's never good. And scared to death, she's going back to Texas or whatever. And we sat down and visited, and I said, "What is it?" And she said, "That my oldest boy. When I left Edmond with that other man, I was already pregnant. That boy's your son." And I thought, well, that's what I need, another kid. But I got the opportunity to raise a boy I didn't know I had. Cheryl and I got married, and we bought a house that had a hallway and about 20 bedrooms. I mean, it was kind of like a breeding farm or some damn thing. Puppy mill, that's what it is. It wasn't that bad, but it's pretty bad. But that boy just got out of the federal penitentiary, did 6.5 years on a drug charge. He's been out 1 month. I spent all morning with him. One of the guys, sponsor, called me, and he said, "What are y'all doing?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to keep Eric out of the penitentiary." I said, "He's not very successful at selling dope, so I'm going to show him how to steal a car." But, we got that. Anyway, 2018, I'm at a men's conference at Lake Murray. A man came up to me and he said, "Joe, would you come to Terrell, Texas to tell your story?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do that, but I don't know. Let me get my calendar and I'll get back with you." Well, the only time that I could do it, that was in March. The only time I could do it was August the 11th. And so I didn't hear a word from March. And about the 1st of August, my sister calls me and she said, "Someone's in Texas trying to get a hold of you." And I thought, well, it's those guys from Terrell. And I said, "Well, get a name and number and I'll call." On the internet, I don't do any of that. And so she gives me this gal's name and number, and I call her. And we're visiting, and I thought, this ain't AA. And I said, "Well, what's this about?" She said, "Well, I think you're my daddy." And I said, "Well, who's your mama?" "How old are you?" And she told me, and I said, "Well, you could be. You could be." So I said, "Look, you live in Greenville, Texas. I'm coming to Terrell, Texas, the 11th. If you want to meet me, I'll come early and meet you and your family." She said, "Do I want to meet you?" She said, "I've been looking for you for 46 years. And she said, "What are you doing in Terrell, Texas?" And I said, "I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going down there to tell my story." She starts bawling. I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I got sober 15 years ago in Terrell, Texas." Yeah, and we have either talked on the phone or at least sent each other little notes or what have you every day since then. That same year, my stepdaughter called, and she said, "The sheriff's here, and they're evicting me from my home." And I said, "Okay." So her mother and I got in the car, and we drove over there, and she's standing in the alley holding the hand of a little 2-year-old boy. And I said, "What's your plan?" And she said, I don't know. I guess Brady and I'll go live in the car." I said, "Baby, that ain't going to happen." I said, "I'm going to take that boy. And when you get your life together, I'll have him." And I loaded that boy up, and that was 7 years ago. I've still got him. In fact, I adopted him. That's pretty cool, you know. Damn old 75-year-old man driving around with a baby seat in the back. Still got it. Sometimes I even roll the window down. I got tinted windows. I'd roll the window. Them young girls see that baby up there. Yeah. You know, I've been blessed in so many, many, many ways. You know, I made amends to an old judge that I just despised. The first time I really met him was at a beer joint in Oklahoma City. And if it hadn't been for a mutual friend, I'd have whooped him that night. Anyway, when I got sober, he was on my amends list. And my sponsor said, hey, I want you to take these big books down to the courthouse and give them out to the two judges and the court clerk. Tell them who we are, what we do, you know, the whole deal. And I said, okay. I didn't want to see that judge, you know, but I thought, well, that's my sign, you know. He was on the list, but he was one of those down here, you know. Anyway, I made amends to him, and I found out right quick the guy had compassion, particularly for alcoholics. So I took him through the book, and so he started kind of doing 12-step work off that bench, and if he thought somebody had potential, he'd take them back in the chambers and talk to them, and then he'd send them my way. And anyway, he gets sick and has to step down from the bench, and he starts, by that time I'm in the record business, and he starts hanging out with me, and long story short, we end up in business together. And, you know, that just making that amend fixed me financially for as long as I'm here, and probably that little boy's life, you know. Been blessed in so many ways, you know, just, we just dissolved that business this past 30 days after 30-something years of running it. And, you know, I've just had to, you know, learn to read. I got a high school diploma when I was 38 years old. I even got me one of them little flat hats, you know, big robe, you know. But, you know, I've been blessed in so many ways. You know, I've been sober 51 years, but you girls, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I got sober when I was 4. You know. But, you know, I'll turn 80 in October, and my health is good, and I've got that little boy to keep up with, and, you know, we've just got a lot of things going, and they're just gifts, absolutely gifts, from doing what I should have done all along, you know. Norm Alfie always said that his sobriety was a gift from God, and what he does with it is his gift back to God, and he hopes God is happy with his gift as I am mine. Thank you.